concepts that were hired as a librarian at Triton Hacks Library, or TH Library. And this library uses an API to manage all their books. So when they get new books, they use that API to add books. When books get checked out, we update the status to checked out and things like that. So we're going to learn how we can use APIs in order to complete a day at work as a librarian. Okay, so these are the things that we're going to learn today. Some of you might be thinking, okay, what the heck is an API? We're going to cover that. We're going to cover some of the more nitty-gritty things like what goes on behind the scenes with servers and clients. We're going to talk about making HTTP requests over the internet to an API. And we're going to talk about refining those requests using something called query parameters. We're also going to talk about submitting data to APIs so that we're not just consuming data and getting data from these APIs, but we're actually able to kind of update the data. And we'll also understand what comes back when we give a request, we get a response. So we're going to talk about how we can understand what is given as a response by APIs. Okay, so we're going to do that brief intro, talk about requests and responses, and then we're going to try stuff out. And I'll also share some follow-up resources if you want to learn more. And I'll also stick around at the end for any questions. Okay, so what the heck is an API? So sometimes we need to get data from a service, like a web service, like a Google or Facebook or Instagram. Since we don't have access to the top secret code bases that these companies have to enable their applications, they create something called an API, or an application programming interface, in order to give that information to developers so that they can use that information without accessing that top secret code base. So like Instagram, for example, you can access things like timestamps on posts, the actual pictures, the text or captions through an API, and they never have to touch the actual code that enables Instagram to be Instagram. So both developers and non-developers use these APIs to get data from popular services like, Instagram, to use in their own projects, like you can do today. So the really cool thing about how development works now is that you don't even have to build things from scratch anymore. Companies like, Facebook, Instagram, Google, Microsoft expose services and data through APIs, and you could just use those things in your applications. And APIs aren't going anywhere anytime soon, which is why I thought this would be a really cool workshop for you all to get exposed to APIs. So even if you don't use them at this hackathon, at least it's an entry point for you to learn more in the future. Okay, so I kind of went over like some technical stuff. So let's think of APIs in kind of like an easy to understand metaphor. So we can think of an API, so this right here in the middle, as a waiter at a restaurant. So what do waiters do? They basically are there to take requests. So imagine you go to your favorite restaurant. I like sushi. So let's say I'm going to Narumi, which is pretty close by to where I am in La Mesa. I go to Narumi and I want to order. In this case, I'm over here. I'm this cool person right here with the sunglasses. I'm the client, okay? And I am gonna make a request through this waiter. And the waiter is gonna go ahead and tell the kitchen, which is the server, what to make, what I would like. Okay, so that's me making a request. The API is in the middle, the waiter is in the middle, and then the server or the chef is kind of like in the background. I'm never talking to that chef. directly. I'm talking to the API. The API is talking to the server. Okay, so then what happens from there? That's just the request. What am I going to get back? I'm going to get back a response. I'm either going to get back what I ordered, which let's see, maybe a rainbow roll, some sashimi. But what happens if what I'm requesting doesn't actually exist? So, oh gosh, I wanted I don't know, I wanted salmon sashimi, and they're all out of salmon. I don't know, there's a salmon shortage. We're overfishing the oceans. There's no salmon. Well, what's going to happen in my response from the server? That server is going to talk to the API, right? Or the waiter in this case, and they're like, I'm all out of salmon. And so my response is going to say, this resource is not available. Salmon's not here. Or I'm in a good state and the ingredients are all there and I get back exactly what I asked for. So either I get back what I asked for, or I'm going to say, or it's going to say, sorry, can't fulfill your request. So that's kind of a silly metaphor, but that's pretty much exactly how APIs work, right? You've got your API as the middleman, you're the client, and there's some server, the chef in this case, that you never see on the back end, that the API is facilitating that conversation between you and the server. Okay, so, oh, I forgot I had animations there. So who here has actually heard about APIs, maybe even used an API, or have at least looked at some documentation for APIs? Or maybe take a guess of maybe an application that you've used that might use an API. And while you're thinking about that, I just kind of want to comment that, you know, there is an API for literally everything that we use on the internet. There are APIs that are exposed by, you know, I already mentioned like top companies like Facebook and Google, but people can kind of make their own. And so you have these silly things popping up like the cat API. You could make your own API that exposes your own data. And yeah, Akimo says that, you know, that op.gg uses an API from League. Yeah, so like literally anything that exists on the web probably uses an API or an app on your phone as well. Discord, yeah, Discord definitely has an API. Yes, that is true. Okay, so yeah, there's like tons of data out there data and services being exposed out there by pretty much everything on the web. And that's why it's so important to kind of learn about it. So working with APIs, you can see this big scary picture on the left, or maybe not scary, but it's definitely not friendly to the eyes, right? It's just a lot of text. This is the command line interface for making API requests, and it's called curl. C for command line, right? But today I'm going to be showing you something that's a little bit more user-friendly, easier on the eyes. It is an application called Postman, and there is a desktop application that I prefer to use, but for today's demo, I'll be using Postman in the web browser so that if you want to follow along with the demonstration, you don't have to worry about installing anything. And I'll also be sharing the collection of APIs that I'll be working with today so that you can kind of interact with it. Okay, so what the heck is Postman? It is a platform. It's an API development platform that makes testing, creating, using APIs way easier because it has a user interface, and it is used by just so many organizations and developers. So it's a really good tool to get familiar with. I use it pretty much every day in my job. And as you can see, some of the top tech companies also use it as well. Okay, so let's talk about requests and responses. Okay, so a little bit of like a technical type overview. Here's the request response pattern. a lot like what we just saw with the restaurant metaphor. So we got the client and we got the server, and then in between we have the network. This is the internet, right? The client sends a request to the server, and the server it gives a response, right? So a client is an entity that makes the request to the server. And some examples of clients are things like web browsers, right? If you go to a website, the server controls the resources, which could be like information or services. And the API is the interface that exposes these resources and services to clients in the network. The client can interact with the API by making requests over the network to the API, and then the API evaluates the request. It's going to perform any required operations like filtering and maybe interact with a database or even other APIs. And then it's going to send back a response. Postman is a client that will allow you to make those requests and also view the responses from servers in a really easy to read way. Okay, so let's like kind of zoom into the pieces or the anatomy of a request. And we're going to talk about what each of these pieces means. So in the anatomy of a request, we have a method, an endpoint or a path, which is usually it's a URL, parameters that we'll talk about what those are in just a bit, headers, and then also a body. So let's talk about methods. Methods and endpoints are the bare minimum that we need for a request. We need to know the method of what kind of requests we're making. Are we getting information? Are we giving information? Are we making a modification on data? And we need to know where to send that request. So we need a URL, a web address to send it to. So here we can see that the method is get, and that the endpoint is google.com/search. That's where we're sending it. We're going to ask Google to search for something, and we're asking for information to come back. Okay. As you can see, there are more types of methods than just get, but get is a really common one. We often want to get information from the internet. Over here on the right, you can see the different pieces of the endpoint. So the HTTPS is the protocol, and the stuff in the middle here is the host. We want to talk to Google server. And then at the end here, after the slash, we see the path, the actual destination on that server, where the request is basically listened for. Okay, so that's the bare minimum, right? We need at least a web address, an endpoint, and a method. But what if we want to kind of filter stuff? We don't want all the information. We don't want to search for everything. Maybe we want to search for everything. That'd be a lot of information coming back from Google. They got a lot of stuff. But what if I wanted to filter? What if I just wanted to search for cats or nature or whatever? Then I would want to use query parameters. And query parameters always start with a little question mark. And then you want to follow that up with a key value pair. So here we see the key right here is Q, which is standing for query. And then we see an equal sign. And then on the other side is the value we want to search for. So our query equals cats. We want to search for stuff that has the value cat. We also have path parameters. And I'm not going to focus so much on that, but basically the thing that is a little bit different with path parameters is that it doesn't have a question mark. Instead, we have this slash. We're adding on to the path, and then there is a value, which is usually like an ID that is just a bunch of letters and numbers. But it doesn't have to be. It could be a name. Okay. Next piece is the request headers. And this is for any metadata associated with our request. we're not going to be going too in depth with this stuff today. This kind of like complicates using APIs, but sometimes you have to be authorized. Actually, often you have to be authorized to use an API. Businesses don't necessarily want to give away their data for free. So sometimes you do have to register for something called like an API key or a token to be able to request their data. And so that would go along with authorization. A cookie is also another way of kind of having like a session so that you can verify you're in the same session on the web. Content type, maybe you want a specific like JSON or XML or HTML. There's also an accept header and a user agent, which is generally just the name of the client requesting. So we're not going to focus too much on that stuff though. Okay, this is the good stuff. Here's the request body. So this part is optional, but it's usually when we want to change data on an API or we want to create a whole new entry on the API. So post data, the post method is when we want to create a resource, and put is when we want to change an existing resource. And so over here on the right, you can see this is called JSON. This is a really good data type to get familiar with, especially if you want to do web app development. And what this is saying is that these are key value pairs of some sort of entity we want to store, like on a database or within an API. And so this entry has a key of name, a value of Jane Doe, key of email, her email address, and then also a birth year and her birth year. Okay, cool. So again, we have request is just half of it. The request is what we are supplying as the client. What we want to get back is a response. And so there's 3 pieces that we're going to get back. We're going to get a status code, maybe some headers, and then a body. Okay, status codes are pretty interesting because they tell you kind of what's going on, right? 200s are great. That's usually what we want. Saying you made a good request and I'm confirming that that was good, and maybe I'm supplying you with information as well if that's what you asked for. 300s are redirection. That's if something like a resource has moved or a resource hasn't changed, and so they're not going to give you, they're not going to update the information on your end. 400s and 500s are you're in trouble. So 400 means that there's something wrong with what you did as the client. So maybe you made a bad request, or maybe you weren't authorized to see that. You were trying to tinker with stuff you weren't supposed to. Or maybe the resource just doesn't exist, or it's forbidden. You don't have, you might be trying to get something that you don't have the authority to see. 500s is on the server's error. Most of the time that might be because it can't handle the traffic or the server's been misconfigured. So 400 and 500 are things that you would normally need to debug. 400 on your end, 500 on the server's end. Okay, so let's get to the actual fun stuff. Let's get to the stuff that you can actually do. So we're going to be looking at that library API. So we are, again, we're hired as a librarian at Triton Hacks Library, and we're going to be using this API. So I'm going to go ahead and open this up, and this is just the documentation, I believe. Yeah. So I'm going to go ahead and put this in the chat. This is just the standalone documentation, but I'm going to give you a more interesting link in just a bit here. I'm also going to open this up. So I'm going to be referencing this little website, which might be a little slow since it's on Heroku. But basically it will interact with the API that we'll be using. Here's the more interesting thing. Here's the collection we're going to be using. And I'm going to take a little time to pause here. Oops, I just noticed I was direct messaging someone. There you go. Here's the collection we're going to be using today. And so, like I said, I'm going to pause here because what I would like you all to do is I'm going to have you, you're going to need to create an account, okay? But what I'm going to have you do is when you open this up, you should be able to click on the collection here on the left that says API 101. And what you'll see is this button that says fork. And let me go into an incognito so that I'm not already logged in. Okay, so if you click it and you're not logged in, you're gonna have to create an account. And the easiest thing you can do is just sign in with Google. So I'll give you all a moment to do that. And let me know in the chat if you're having any trouble with that. You can always direct message me as well. But I'll give you just like a minute or so to do that. And once you're ready, if you could just give me like I don't know, let me know in the chat once you're ready and you see this screen right here. Do we continue without a team? Yeah, you don't have to be in a team. Says you don't have access. Okay, I thought I made it public. I'm sorry. Give me one moment and I'll get you another link that will be basically the same. Copy link address. Let's try this one right here. It's a test. Okay, so the second link works. Okay, perfect. It's the same, it's basically the same thing that I have up here. Cool. Thank you for letting me know. I'll give just maybe what role, it doesn't matter what role you put. You could choose whatever you want. Okay, I'll just wait a little bit longer. Wait for those of you who are finishing up. So once you're logged in, hopefully you see something like what I'm sharing on my screen right now. Actually, I think you might see a little bit more on your end. Let me actually use that same link so that I'm seeing exactly what you guys are seeing. Yeah, so this resource has more than just the 101. We just want to pay attention to this 101 thing right here. So what you're going to do is you're just going to click on that folder, API 101, and then you're going to click on fork. And what a fork is, it's basically just your own copy of that resource. And what you need to do is to just type in a name. So you could just say API 101, my copy or something like that. And then if you're just starting out, you probably just have this thing that's called My Workspace. You can keep that selected. And then what you want to do is just click that big orange button that says Fork Collection. And now you should be taken to your very own copy of this API collection. And then let me go ahead and zoom in here. So you should let's talk a little bit about the pieces that we see on here. So on the left here, you have the folders that's in this collection that you can click the little wedges, the little arrows, I guess, to expand. Oh, is it not showing? Really? It says I'm sharing. Let me. Oh, it's good on your end? Huh, that's interesting. You see it too. Okay, Kay, I'm not sure why you don't see it. Maybe leave and come back. Sorry about that. Okay. Yeah, maybe. It is being recorded though, so you'll be able to catch up if you miss anything. Okay, great. All right, so yeah, you can expand out these things, and inside of each of these folders is something called a request, which we just talked about, right? This is a request we can send to an API. And then the other cool thing is at the folder level, you can see some documentation. And if you don't see it, if you're kind of like in this mode, you should see like a little icon that looks like a piece of paper, and it'll say documentation. If you hover over it, just click on that and it'll expand it out. And so the documentation is cool because it explains kind of like what this is and how to use it. For the sake of time, we might not do the your turn independently. We might do it together. So we'll just play it by ear. Okay, so but generally, what we would do is we've already done this. We've worked the collection. We're not going to jump into this just yet. What we're going to do is we're going to play around with the stuff in the library API reference that already has some requests for us. So I'm going to click on that, and on this documentation, it tells me the base URL. So this is the path to the API that we want to access. What's really cool is that this path is already stored in a variable for us. So we don't have to type this out or copy paste it every time. If I go back to this upper level, to the API 101 label, I have some options here in the middle. I see authorization, pre-request script, tests, and variables. If you click on the variable, you can see all the variables that are already stored for us. And notice that the base URL variable has that endpoint for us. So that's cool. There's also a couple others that are stored here, like just a base ID and then a collection ID that doesn't have anything yet. So anytime we want to reference this space path, all we have to do is use this variable instead of remembering what this is. Pretty handy. So if I click now, I'm going to go into this second folder, the library API reference, and I'm going to go to this first request. What's the method of this first request? Who can tell me the method? Remember those 4 methods we had? Yeah, this is a GET request. And what does a GET request do? What are we asking? It's kind of a silly question. We want to get info, right? We want the server to give us some data, right? Okay, so again, notice here's the variable. And if we hover over it, we can actually see the value is that URL, that postman-library-api.glitch.me. And then here's the path. This is one path that this API accepts, and it's called books. If we want to know what the heck this thing does, remember, here's our documentation over here. So I'm going to click that. And it tells me exactly what this endpoint does. It says it returns all the books in the library database. I can use some optional filters, but we're not going to do that just yet. We're just going to go ahead and we're going to click the send button, sends the request, and down here, we get the response back. What do you see as a response? What kind of data are we getting back? What kind of information? Different books, yeah. And what format is it in? I mentioned it like once. Objects, yeah, that's technically correct. JSON objects, yeah. And you can even see here that it's set to JSON, and then we're seeing it really nice because it's set to pretty. If I put it on raw, ugh, I don't want to look at it that way. That's terrible. But basically, yeah, that's how we get the information back. The internet, the server and the client don't care what kind of format it's in, but our human eyes do. So that's why we're going to click pretty and look at it that way. Okay, so it looks like every book object has these different fields: title, author, ID, genre, year published, whether or not it's checked out, so either a true or a false, and then when this entry was actually created. Cool. Good to know. What if we don't want all the books though? We don't want to know what all the books the library has. We just want to find one book. We would use this one, this request right here. So this is another get request, but instead of having just books here, we add another piece to the path here. We're gonna add an ID. And right now, this is set to just use the variable that we have set, but I could take this out and I could look at something here and I could pick any one of these IDs. So let's maybe pick Haruki Murakami's books ID. So it's this one right here. I'm just gonna copy that. Copy. And then over here, I'm gonna paste that in. And so notice this isn't a query parameter, this is a path parameter because it's just a slash and then something after it, in this case, the ID. So if I send that, I should just get that one book back. So now I get one book object back instead of all of them. So that's one way I can filter my results. Awesome. All right, well, I'm tired of just getting information. I want to give information. I want to add a book to my library. We just made some purchases because customers wanted some new books to read. So we got to add that to our inventory. Okay, well, what do we need to do? Well, we need to change the method. We're no longer getting. What method are we using now? We are using starts with a P. It's also on my screen. Post, yes. Whenever we post something, we are creating an entry on the back end. Okay, so it's actually the same path, right? These get requests and this post request have the same path, but the method is different. And that's how our API is going to know that we're not asking for information, we are giving information. But how are we going to give information? I don't see any information here in this URL. Well, if I remember from the presentation, I can supply information where? Can anyone remember? And it's okay if you can't. Query is you could technically do that. Yes, you could technically do that. But it's even better if you put it in the request body, because then you can put a bunch of stuff there and not have to worry about a bunch of stuff in your URL or URI. So here we can actually supply JSON data in our request body to send to the API, which will get sent to the server to actually store. So here, there's just something supplied for us. But if you want to click on this and put in your own, like your favorite book or something, one of my favorite books is Dune, and it's by Herbert, science fiction. And then year published, I think it's around then, maybe 1965, I'm gonna guess. Notice that I'm not supplying all the fields here. There are some other fields that I remember from back here, like checked out, created at, and ID. I'm not supplying ID because that's gonna happen automatically for me. Created at is also going to happen automatically for me. checked out is also going to happen automatically. It's going to automatically set it to false because we just added the book to our system. So we're going to assume that it's not checked out. If it does get checked out, we're going to change it in the next one. So here I'm just supplying the title, the author, the genre, the year published, and then the API sets the standard values or the default values for those other fields. So if I click this, actually before I do that, before I even send this, I created a little demonstration website that actually pulls this data onto this website and shows each book in a nice little format. So if I look at this right now, I don't see that book called Dune on here anyway. Oops. I just realized every time someone direct messages me, it makes me direct message them back. So let me put that URL back in there. Okay, so if you want to go to that website to see this, you can. So now let's see what happens after I post this new book to my API. Let me go back over to, there we go. I'm going to send it. The first thing I want you to notice is the response we get back. We get JSON back saying message, okay, cool, did it. But we also get a status code of 201, which means I successfully created a new resource for you. So I'm going to say thank you, API, but I'm going to go ahead and double check that. I'm going to go to my website that uses that information. And without me changing anything on my website's code, I'm going to see that new book appear because my website is created in such a way that it uses the API to get any new information from it. So I'm going to go ahead and refresh. And lo and behold, apparently I added it twice. Or maybe someone else did. Yeah, one of you probably did it. You can see that we now have that book added to our inventory. Cool. And again, I didn't change the code on my website. I didn't have to go in and add a whole new entry, which is what you used to have to do before APIs. And it's a big old headache. So that's one of the really cool uses of APIs, is being able to have these dynamic websites that pull new information from and new resources from an API. Okay, so let's go on and look at these other ones here. So let's say, okay, I'm in this library, we got these new books. I got this new book, Dune, in. I saw it get added to our inventory. And now someone comes in and they say, hey, I want to check out that book. If we look at the library right now, it's available, right? It has the little checkout button. But someone is now checking it out. And so now we need to update it to say that it's checked out. For that, we're going to use, we could technically use put, or we can use patch to update an existing resource. We're going to use patch, and patch is kind of cool because instead of supplying all the fields, you can just supply one field that you want to update. In this case, what aspect about our book do we want to update if we're going to say, if someone's checking out this book? Here's a list of all the fields that we have available to us. Which field do we want to update if someone's checking out our book? Yeah, checked out. So we want to update checked out, not to be false, but to be true. We want to say that it's true. In this API endpoint, notice that we need the ID of the book that, yeah, Boolean, exactly. We need the ID of the book that we want to say is checked out. Okay, so I need the ID to this book. I'm just going to quickly kind of do another GET request on our list of books. If I send that, I can see all the entries for Dune. We'll take the one that's on the top here with this ID. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my patch request right here. And then where it says ID, I'm going to go ahead and replace that with the ID of Dune. Okay. And then what do I need to do? I need to go to my body. That's where the data is that I'm going to pass. And actually, since it's part of the library API reference piece, they already have the request body filled out for you, checked out, like we said, and we're going to set it to true because the person's checking it out. So let's go ahead and send that request, and it should tell us, okay, cool, did it, updated it for you. And now let's double check on our website. And it might take a little time to actually update because this is Heroku. There we go. So now you can see that it is unavailable. You can no longer check it out. That's exactly what we wanted to happen. We don't want people to try to check out books that don't exist. Cool. All right, so let's go and let's say, oh shoot, the person checked out a book. And who here has ever lost a library book or even a school textbook? I know that happened a lot. Well, guess what? Our customer lost their book. So we need to remove it from the system. Let's say that the Dune book got lost. So in this case, we're going to do the same, kind of the same thing that we did. The only difference is that, again, our method is going to change. We're not patching. We're going to delete a resource. So the method here is delete. But what we want to do again is we're going to replace this ID variable with the ID of the book that we're going to delete. And again, it's that same Dune book. So when I submit this request, send, it's going to tell me, okay, I did it, confirmed. If I go back to the library site, it's gone. I think other people, yeah, and other people have been submitting a bunch of stuff. Cool, that's good. Yeah, but that original one that was like right here is gone. I can see a lot of you have been playing with this. That's good. Awesome. Someone put in green eggs and ham, Dr. Seuss. Amazing. All right, so basically we've used all 4 HTTP methods. There are more, but those are kind of the main ones along with put to not only get information from an API, but also to modify the information, or in the last case, delete an entire resource. Again, this seems like a lot of power to have. That's because this is just a play API where you don't need any authorization. For things like Google's API, any of Google's APIs, I should say, like Google Maps and things like that, you need something called like an API key or a token to be able to gain access to their APIs. Yeah, so let's see here. So if you want to, you can attempt the stuff under your turn. The documentation kind of takes you through kind of what to do. But we don't have a ton of time left. So what I'd like to do is kind of come back over here. And again, this doing the your turn is optional if you want to learn more. But I kind of want to go through some of the other opportunities if you want to learn more about APIs. So I am using kind of just modified instructional material from a great company called Postman. Again, this is a tool that I use every day in my work, and I have connections there that have graciously lent me their resources to kind of lead this workshop. But they also have something called a student expert certification program. And what that means is that it basically shows that you are proficient in just kind of like the basic essential skills involved in building the API requests that we just did. There's also another element, which is API testing to ensure that an API is behaving the way you want it to, that I did not cover here today. But basically what this does is it shows that you can send some more sophisticated requests. You can create documentation, write test scripts, create your own collections, and things like that. Um, I will link to this in the chat. Oops. And I know that most of you are starting out with your knowledge about APIs. So it may seem really daunting to kind of attempt to become a Postman student expert. But the thing is that they actually have instructional materials and self-guided labs and documentation that you can follow to learn even more. And once you complete their student expert program, you get like a fun little digital badge that you can show off and put on your LinkedIn profiles and things like that. So I really, really recommend doing that because it's something that for those of you, I know you're still in high school, some of you just graduated, maybe moving on to college. Internships are something that you should get started on right away. And if you can show that you have some knowledge of these very popular tools like Postman, it's going to help you a lot. So I just kind of wanted to share that resource with y'all and kind of give a quick overview about what APIs are. So with that, we have about 10 minutes left. So I would love to open up to Q&A if anyone has any questions, or I can stick around and help people that want to go through the try it yourself, your turn piece. So up to you. If there's any questions, let me know, and I'll stick around. Oh, yeah.
Also, before you guys leave, I need to give you guys the check-in code for this workshop.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Here. I'll post it in the chat, and please fill in the check-in form so we know that you're here. Oh, okay, Jose sent it.
Oh, thank you, Jose.
That's the check-in code.
PMXH. So yeah, I also just wanted to say, if any of you decide to use any APIs in your projects and you get stuck, feel free to ping me on the Discord. My name again is Sarah Kazemi, also a tutor and a mentor for Triton Hacks. Burp Suite, so Burp Suite I generally use for, I've done that in capture the flags when trying to figure out vulnerabilities in websites. So yeah, I've used that before. Oh, and if anyone's interested in deploying websites to Heroku like I have done here, and you need help with that, that's also something I can help you out with. It's a great way to get your web apps deployed without paying for anything. Alrighty. Well, if y'all don't have any other questions for me, I want to thank you so much for coming to learn about APIs with me. And I wish you all luck on the hackathon. Again, I'm Sarah Kazemi. Feel free to ping me on Discord if you have any questions. And I'll see you later.
Thank you.
Thank you.